Hello everyone and welcome to the FlightFX Cessna Citation X tutorial video. We'll be taking you on a trip from Punta Cana International, that's Mike Delta Papa Charlie, over and around to Princess Juliana Airport, that's Tango November Charlie Mike. My name's AJ. I'm one of the QA staffers for the studio, and we're pleased to have you aboard with a great look at our latest product. This is a very fast business jet, highly sought after as far as being brought to life in the new Microsoft Flight Simulator universe. And so we're happy to bring you aboard and give you a little bit of a show as to the new features and a glimpse of how to operate the jet based on a little over a year and a couple of months of development and testing. So welcome aboard. First things first, I just want to introduce you to the latest iteration of our electronic flight bag. This is the VAMS, the Virtual Aircraft Management System. It's now in its third generation. We introduced it with the very popular Vision Jet for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Improved upon it with the Piaggio 180 in the same simulator. And now we've brought it into the Cessna Citation X with a lot of new features as well as customer favorites that we've made sure to be included in the feature set. So first things first, you want to note that we can now swivel this tablet, we can now rotate this tablet, and within certain bounds of movement we can manipulate the way the tablet is facing you. So we can maneuver in these three dimensions to make the tablet more view friendly and certainly not impinge upon the dashboard view and prevent you from seeing critical instruments. You'll note at the bottom of the VAMS tablet we have a running tally of the various speeds indicated, ground and true. Those will get updated as the aircraft takes flight. We also feature a present position weather readout, so if you happen to be at an airport that does not have an ATIS or weather reporting capability in order to initialize your flight management system and build your performance tables, you can simply look at the home page on the VAMS tablet, and we give you outside air temperature, relative wind, and the barometric altitude reading. Let's jump to the config page. Backed by popular demand, active noise reduction. It really works well. Of course, we have taken full advantage of our collaboration with the very famous Boris of Boris Soundworks. Boris, as always, has done a great job of capturing all the full fidelity of the sounds of the Citation X, engine noises, system noises, even the latching and unlatching of the main doors and the luggage doors can be clearly heard. However, after a long period of time, especially on longer flights for which this business jet is capable of, the engine sounds, however well dampened in the cockpit, can be fatiguing. So you can simply turn on active noise reduction to help alleviate that. It should be noted that the Citation X by design does not have an auto throttle. When it rolled off a production line, it simply had a FADEC. Over time, of course, with crowded airspace, more demanding requirements upon owners and operators, it became clear that a aftermarket auto throttle would be a popular and certainly uh, well 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 received item. So you can enable a real world STC approved auto throttle, and if you click on it, it takes up that part of the instrument dash. There's the readout for the auto throttle behavior. What speed is it following, and any FADEX settings. Um, this is the on off, and this dial simply switches you between the FMS speed schedule and the pilot managed schedule. Also new to the EFB is physical auto throttle override. So if you have a physical throttle, you can override the AT if it happens to be on simply by moving your throttle axis, and so that movement will be detected and disable the auto throttle. In a nod to the rich history of the Citation 10, the dev team came up with a screen style immersion factor, meaning that early marks of the Citation 10 rolled off a production line with these displays using cathode ray tubes. Over time, the technology improved, and we switched to liquid crystal displays. So you can choose between the two of them. The change is more than just an appearance. There's actually very detailed cathode ray patterns that you can see if you pick this version. If you pick the LCD, it's a lot crisper, but you have to adjust the luminosity just like the actual early generation liquid crystal displays. New to the Citation 10 also is the throttle cues. When you look at the ICAS readouts, you'll see detente settings to help you manage your throttle if you choose not to use the AT module. So you'll see markings for climb, takeoff, cruise, idle. So that's available to help those of you who want to manage the throttle manually. The IRS needs to be aligned as part of the cold and dark startup. There are 2 units right here behind the throttle quadrant. And you can choose between 3 different align speeds: instant, which is instantaneous, of course; fast, which is about 5 to 7 seconds; and the realistic mode, for those of you who like full immersion, is going to be 5 to 7 minutes per unit. So if you're short on time, we would not recommend this. You can also turn on and off our passenger visibility, and new to the EFB also is a much requested feature: pause at top of descent. So for those of you who are away from keyboard and are afraid of missing the critical moment where you have to do some systems management or planning management, or power and throttle management, if you're not using the auto throttle, pause at TOD can save you from an aborted flight. This is a popular feature that we've brought back, of course. It's available in all of our EFBs that we've published. We'll offer you quick time-saving states that you can get to right away: cold and dark, ready to taxi, ready for takeoff. New to the EFB as well is the ability to convert certain key measurement units in between imperial and metric. So that was a much requested feature as well. We have a calibration feature. This is also new, whereby you can calibrate your physical throttle to match certain markings or levels of travel for your physical throttle to match up with detents like cruise, climb, and takeoff. And as introduced in the P180, we can modify the cabin layouts and the food service. Ground services is where you can conduct all of your walkthrough items. So we can remove the instrument covers and the engine covers. As you can see, they're clearly marked in red on the jet. So we can remove those right now. We'll leave the chocks in place. Just to show you very quickly, main door, you can hear it opening and unlatching, and the luggage door. We'll go quickly to an external view. There you go. You just saw the boarding ladder assist for the luggage door unfolding as I switched views. So we'll close and latch those safely in preparation for takeoff. While we're here, we'll add or invoke a ground power unit. If the airport ramp spot that you're at is coded to provide ground power, you can invoke our cart and it will appear. That's not a factor that we at FlightFX can control. That's entirely up to the scenery author whether they coded the ramp spot accordingly. But most major airport sceneries are coded in this manner, so it would be very rare for you, unless you were at an extremely tiny facility, to not have the ability to call up a ground power unit. And before we get started, let's finish off the EFB. Players will be pleased to know that we have moved the weight and balance capability from the sim. Those menus still exist in Flight Simulator 20 and Flight Simulator 24. However, you can now manipulate all of the weight and balance of a jet from the EFB, and certainly in a much easier fashion than the built-in menus from each sim. As an operational note, the 170 pounds each of the pilot and co-pilot are built into the base weight, so you don't need to account for those. All you have to do is just simply click on a given available seat and dial in some weight. I tend to try and give 3 passengers who are all around or under 150 pounds, and then some cargo, usually around 250 to 300. That gives us a fairly good 650 to 700 pound payload, and we'll load the jet with some fuel. We're not going to go too far. This flight shouldn't be more than an hour, around just a little over 300 nautical miles as the crow flies. So when you hit apply, you saw the jet crouch a little bit as it took the weight, and we of course provide a warning right here to say if the fuel wasn't applied, that warning would show up here in amber. We are accommodating our players with SimBrief, so you just need to set up your SimBrief ID and then you can import from the utility from there. We have a moving map display courtesy of OpenStreetMap. It is centered on the player aircraft right here, and you can just click this button to recenter at any given time. Please note that this is drawn from open source data. OpenStreetMap is one of those big data collections out in the cloud, and so by virtue of that, anybody in the public can come in and edit content, and if it manages to get through the built-in filters that OpenStreetMap might have, you might end up seeing information and or labels that are misrepresentative or perhaps inaccurate or even inappropriate in the course of traversing the map while using it. So we're not in charge of that. It's OpenStreetMap. That's the price you pay for an open source collection of data. Finally, we're pleased to provide the Navigraph app for our Navigraph subscribers who are our customers. So that's available. And we can simply use the built-in keyboard to type in the ICAO code of the facility that you need information for. Excuse me. And we'll type in Punta Cana, of course, and we'll call up the taxi information to show us where we are on the ramp. There we are. It has, of course, a moving map display showing exactly where the player aircraft is geolocated on an individual chart. And that is our EFB. So we're pleased to bring all of those features to you to help you plan a better flight, manage your flight, and enjoy some immersion. Before we start the cold and dark, we want to point out a couple of features that are a nod to the limitations of a sim. Most of us are using the sim in a 2D fashion. Many of us don't have VR or head trackers or anything like that. So anything that can help keep us heads up and out is very helpful. And the Citation X's ergonomics are such that it is a two-person aircraft. This is not a business jet that's rated for single pilot operation. So theoretically, you really need two people to operate this. One of those limitations comes to mind is the dials for the CDI, the altitude selector, and the heading marker. And those are all down here, nested behind the throttle quadrant. Unfortunately, looking down this way means that you're not looking up, and you need to find yourself in a situation where you're adjusting one or more of these settings, and you should really be heads up and out while your hand is, or your virtual pointer is manipulating that particular control. To that end, we repurposed some of the screws that are holding in this portion of the instrument panel and put handwritten labels on it to build a little bit of ambiance and immersion. So you can adjust your CDI, your altitude selector, and your heading bug all from these screws that have been repurposed as knobs that recreate these three controls. You're not obligated to use these. If these don't appeal to you because you want to enjoy the full realism and you don't mind or don't care that you need to be heads down manipulating those controls, or if you're like many of our users, you have enough hardware controls that you're not even looking down there, you're just simply touching your hardware controls in the real world to manipulate those. So they're there for your convenience. We certainly strive to maintain a high level of fidelity and accuracy, but we also acknowledge the various challenges of using a 2D sim and try and, where possible, give some player conveniences without compromising the overall feel of a realistic jet. So those are there for your convenience. Finally, the eagle-eyed among you may notice that our gen switches are all up already. Normally, you would not bring your generators online until after you've achieved engine start for that particular side generator. Thanks to our resident Citation X owner operator, John Kulenker, who's been very generous with his time, his access, and sharing his experience and feedback with us on the closed beta of this product. He tells us that many Citation X operators simply leave the gen switches up completely in the on position at all times. And so, in a nod to the realism that we'd like to capture in this product, we too have left those switches up in even the cold and dark configuration. So that's why they're set the way they are. All right. Now, let's go to the cold and dark start. First, let's get rid of the yokes because they are kind of in the way of some of the controls that we need access to and visibility to. Because we have a ground power unit running, first step we can do is to start to draw the power from the ground cart. That's the external power button, power toggle to on right there. And we're starting to draw the power from the ground power unit. If you didn't have access to the ground power unit, instead of clicking that, your first step would be to bring the standby power to on. But since we do have access to ground power, that becomes step number 2. Then we bring the emergency lights to arm. We'll bring up both batteries. Those were actually on already. And we'll bring up the ICAS so that we can start to see some of the crew alert messages and start to take action on those. You'll notice the big unmistakable heading fail notice right there. And when the avionics come online, you'll also see an FD flight director fail notice at the top of the annunciator. This is a reminder that we need to align the IRS units, but not before we set present position in the GPS on the MCDU. But we can't do any of that until we bring avionics to life. So we'll turn on the avionics power now. And now we can initialize present position. So present position in it right there on that page. Takes a couple of seconds, but it loaded very quickly. So here's our last known position, which corresponds to present position. And then that gets loaded automatically into the initial position for the GPS. You simply hit the skip key next to the load. It confirms, yep, we've loaded that present position, and then we can go to flight plan. So before we do anything else after that, we've loaded present position. Let's align the IRSs. In order to do that, you bring these two knobs to align, and then the yellow align illuminates, and then depending on which speed setting you had selected in the EFB, nav ready will come on after the appropriate period of time. Align will extinguish, and then you can bring the knob from align to nav. So let's do that right now. There you go. Because I picked instantaneous, it happened right away. Okay, so we are aligned. All the lights extinguished. And if you look at the telltales on the PFD and the MFD, they have heading fail and FD fail have disappeared. Okay, we're good to go there. So performance initialization, active flight plan. Let's check to make sure we have a departure. And for that, I just want to check to make sure. So wind is coming from 70 degrees at 5 knots. That would make either runway 8 or runway 9 the most likely assigned departures. So let's just check and see the ATIS and see which runway is in use. Okay, because of a limited number of channels available at Punta Cana, I've elected to stop the ATC feed so that we can continue to have an audio conversation or presentation inside the tutorial video. So we've basically essentially silenced the ATIS feed and the ground feed by switching the COM1 to guard, which is 121.5. So we needed the things that we needed to know. The departure will be from runway 8. We can choose to have a standard instrument departure. I think for simplicity's sake, we're going to just defer on setting a SID, and we'll just activate using runway 8. And that's good enough to get us through the performance initialization step. So we'll just double check. DDP, MALI, STT, PASIC, LARP, and then JUICE. And then from JUICE, we'll transition into the RNAV approach into Princess Juliana, and we'll get rid of that discontinuity once we're closer to the descent state. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Now we'll go to performance initialization. The performance mode will be full performance, which is true. We want that. Climb will be at Mach 0.80. We will try and achieve maximum speed depending upon what the flight management system says we can achieve based on current weather, temperature, weight, and flight profile. And our descent will also be at 300 knots or Mach 0.80, whichever one is available and or applicable, and at a 3-degree downslope. Transition altitude is fixed in the sim, so we don't change that. We will be cruising at a lower altitude of flight level 310, again, mostly because of the relatively short distance between Punta Cana and Princess Juliana. By the time we get to a higher altitude like 370 to 390, where you usually find the citation, it'll almost be time to immediately descend. And so we'll be burning gas for very little value. As noted earlier, our cargo is somewhere around 650 pounds. We're still within gross weight, so we'll confirm that. Cruise altitude is flight level 310. Fuel required, fuel over so the fuel required, we have it. That's not an issue. Distance is 302 nautical miles roughly, and we'll have just a little over 9,700 pounds fuel remaining, assuming that we take no deviations during this flight plan. All right, takeoff. I took some notes during ATIS readback, so wind is 083 at 11. Outside air temp is 28 degrees centigrade. And pressure is 30.03. Checks at the bottom of the altimeter tape, so that's good to go. We have runway data, a little over 10,100 feet available. Runway condition is indeed dry. We will not have anti-icing turned on, neither on the control surfaces or the engines. Flaps will be at full flaps for takeoff, which is 15. Once again, double check takeoff weight is within limits. We'll confirm the initialization. As a reminder, we'll check the runway use. We anticipate using just a little under 3,000 feet for the takeoff at given weight and temperature, pressure density, and altitude. We have 10,177 available, so no problems there. The V speeds will be calculated at this point. There they are. However, they are not transferred yet to the PFD. The reason being is that we need to blow down the flaps. In order to blow down the flaps, we need the hydraulics. In order to get the hydraulics, we've got to have engine start. And for engine start, we need the APU, which is over there on the co-pilot side. So we're going to take care of all of that in a second. Let's just finish the program for the flight management system. We confirm top of climb altitude is flight level 310, which is cruise. We will be climbing at 0.80. And at cruise altitude, we will be at 31,000 feet. And at the most, we will be able to achieve 0.89 Mach. And so we'll stop here because this is the cruise section, and we'll need that. I'm going to switch the radio tuning really quickly to, so how I did that is I went to nav, went to tune, brings up the radios. That's where I changed the comm briefly to guard to shut off the ATC chatter. And what I want to do is switch this to next, and that brings up the transponder page so that I have easy access to that when we request IFR clearance, and then I read back the clearance. So we're pretty much ready to go. What we need to do now, as I mentioned before, is to turn on the APU, and that'll give us an independent electrical load for which we can then shut off the external GPU cart and start running off the APU, as well as access to bleed air so that we can start the engines. We need both the electrical power and the bleed air. I'm going to turn the APU master on. Everything that is APU control related is bound by this white label box right here marked APU system. There are also two telltales up here, APU relay engaged and APU fail, as well as a fire warning light, which would, if it was a real fire warning, it will also invoke a master warning on the eyebrow panel. Okay, we're going to see all of these lights illuminate when we turn on the APU master and then use the press to test switch. So let's start with turning on the APU. We need 22 volts. We have 28. EGT is going to start to slowly climb a little bit. It's not really going to climb that much because APU is not really fully on yet, and we should see no RPMs. So APU test. There you go. There's all the telltales. Now, what's going to happen is in order to get the APU fully started, we need to flick this APU starter switch, which is a toggle up. So just use the arrow, hold down the mouse key if you're like me and just using your left and right mouse button. So left mouse button, hold it up until it releases on its own. You're going to see EGT climb, briefly peak past the 718 degrees Celsius and then back down, and RPMs are going to start to slowly climb. What we're looking for is the ready to load light right here, indicating we can now bring the generator online and start to pull an electrical load from the APU, and then we can disconnect from the ground power cart. There we go, ready to load. So let's put an electrical load on the APU. Ready to load extinguishes. While we're here, let's also start the bleed air, and there's the bleed air telltale. So we can start engines right after we disconnect the ground power card. For that, we switch external power to off, go to ground services, dismiss the ground power card. Now at this point, you're probably thinking, wow, I haven't had time to scribble any of the notes on this thing. Um, I don't want anyone to feel rushed in that regard or having to stop and start this video to make note of what I did. This is simply a cold and dark workflow start that I've fallen into habit since I've been testing this product throughout its various iterations for over 14 months. We provide a full and detailed checklist in both the 20 and 2024 versions built in. Here in 2020, of course, it's available through the toolbar. And you can see it's full featured. We have all the stages. It's fully available. In 24, you would use the Asobo EFB, the one that you can invoke by hitting the tab key. And in the aircraft section, there's a checklist that looks just like this one in 2020, and it's partitioned the same way, broken down by task and phases. So you don't have to feel the need to take extensive notes or to go back and forth hitting the reverse and forward preview buttons on the video. We provide a full checklist that you can reference later, and if after you've gone through it a couple of times, it becomes second nature. So it's easy to learn. It's just a lot of detail all at once when you haven't done it before. So don't worry, we provide the full checklist. We're just showing folks how a particular workflow might be for someone who's used the jet more than a couple of times. Okay, so we've disconnected ground power. What we really need to do is get the engine started so we can blow down the flaps and then transfer the V speeds. Then we can turn on all the safety lights and then request taxi, pushback and taxi, and then we can be out of here. All right, so let's start with the engines. Before we do, want to point out a special set of click spots on the throttle quadrant area. These are engine cutoff left and right. They are near the base of each throttle. So if you just hang your mouse pointer right here where the bottom of each throttle would land, you can put these throttles into engine cutoff state. The reason we do this is most physical throttles, even at the bottom of their detente, will only reach the idle detente. They won't be able to achieve the engine cutoff state, and that certainly applies to my older throttle quadrant. We need both engine power levers in cutoff in order to properly start the engines. So we have bleed air and electrical power. Engine start is really simple in the citation. Simply hit the corresponding left or right hand igniter. Watch the N2 indicator up here. You're looking for it to go past 10. Once it's past 10%, bring the corresponding power lever from cutoff into idle. And then monitor ITT N1, N2, oil pressure, oil temperature, fuel flow. And notice we also have hydraulics now. So wait for it to stabilize. It's around 22, 23, about 574, 575 for the ITT, and around 640 for N2. And just to show you, there you go. You can see the distortion coming out of a starboard side engine, but the port side is completely cold. All right, let's finish engine start for number 2. Press the left-hand engine, N2 past 10%, bring the power lever into idle from cutoff. There you go. Good start, both engines. Now that we have hydraulics, we can blow down the flaps. Flaps control is right here, but many of us, of course, have hardware controls, so I'll just use mine. There's the telltale readback that says flaps are coming down. If you see an additional set of white that's actually on top of these wing outlines, that means your speed brake is deployed. So that's just a double check. You do not want to try and take off, obviously, with speed brakes enabled. You will never achieve takeoff speeds, and it'll be very dangerous. Stab trim now has a takeoff arc that's moved towards the bottom, so we'll use my electric trim to move that needle. That's just the system saying, hey, you're holding down the electric trim. Is that really what you want to do? Just move it until the trim needle turns green. That means you are in the takeoff arc. And that's all you need to do for that. Let's get some safety lights on. Passenger safety / seat belts is one of those three-way toggle switches. If you click it toggle up to passenger safety to seat belt, all it does is turn on the seat belt sign. What you want to do for takeoff is to move it down to seat belt and pack safety. What that does, you heard the chime, of course, it turns on the seat belt sign, no smoking sign, and illuminates the red exit placard above the main cabin door. We're going to move this switch to ground recognition, and then later when we're airborne to aerial anti-collision. Nav lights are coming on, recognition lights are coming on. That leaves just a few switches before taxi. Left and right pitot heat are right there. Here's your taxi lights. Here's both your landing lights. All right, now we can request clearance. So I'll retune the radio through here and request IFR clearance. And so you saw the Alt Select moving while ATC was confirming that we read back correctly. Again, this is where the Alt shortcut here is very useful. If you were to use this control right here, you'd never be able to see what the Alt cell is actually reading back. You'd have to flip back and forth, or you'd have to find a really expanded wide area zoom range where this number might be unreadable or the control barely registers using a mouse pointer. So that's one of the reasons why we provided a duplicate set of controls up there for convenience. Okay, a couple of more things to do. We're going to set takeoff on the flight director. That's that thumb button right there. If you were to grab this throttle in real life, and that simply moves the flight director to the proper pitch up attitude on the pitch ladder so that you can follow the prompts to achieve proper pitch nose pitch during takeoff roll. Okay, we have clearance. Let's put on the taxi lights before we forget, right there. And then let's see if I can use the shortcut to request a pushback, and that's the old Shift P command. While we're there, we remove the chocks. We'll keep the parking brake on until we see the pushback tug has engaged the front nose wheel gear, and then we'll release it, and then he can push us back. And there we go. And the good news is, at least in 2020, most of the default airports don't really have too much traffic, so we aren't at least trying to jockey for position or priority in the lineup to the active. So we're pretty far now. So let's just hit Shift P again and dismiss the tug. And let's request the taxi instructions. And so, translated, we'll go out over here to the ramp, cut down this taxiway path here, go to the end of 09, go to the connector, and then end up right here at 08 for the hold short. So what I'm going to do here, folks, is I'm going to pause the recording and just get us to the hold short. That way you don't have to spend a lot of airtime watching me taxi, which I think is a fairly straightforward activity, even if you're unfamiliar with our jet. So I'll just show you real quick how we got started. I'm just simply applying a little bit of throttle, and I'm using my flight stick's rudder axis, which is right now doing double duty as nose wheel steering. And we'll roll out here to the taxiway, and we'll make our way around. So we'll be back. Let me pause the recording, and then we'll pick it up at the hold short. Okay, folks, and we are back. We're at the hold short for 08, as you can see right here, and we're going to go and request clearance now from tower. Okay, takeoff clearance. Let's shut off the taxiway taxi lights and bring up the landing lights. And we'll do a final configuration check on the active right before we do the engine run up and then release the brakes. Okay, runway 08 confirmed. Okay, here we go. Just going to set heading bug to runway heading. We have takeoff indicators, flight directors in takeoff, flaps are full down, stab trim is in takeoff, landing lights are on, pitot heat is on. Nope, it is not. And that's why we check the CAS messages. Okay, that's ISO valve informational, and APU is on. At this point, if I'm just holding the brakes using the brake pedals, uh, we should see a clear CAS with just white informational. If you're seeing a blue no takeoff, that means you're missing a configuration step and you should double check all your settings. We don't see that, so we're good to go, and we're going to just spool up the engines. At the most we'll get is 83% N1. Airspeed is alive, both sides. Engine power takeoff achieved. Looking for V1, rotate. Positive rate, gear up. Flight level change, maintain heading, pitch down a little.
Citation 750 on 126.9er.
All right. AP is coming on. Auto throttle is coming on. Shows N1 in climb. That's correct. Heading mode. And then we'll turn the heading to intercept the leg. The aircraft is pitched level at this point, building up airspeed according to the FMS schedule for 250 knots since we're in terminal airspace under 10,000 feet. Once we achieve 250 knots, you'll see the rate of climb skyrocket, and there it is. We're at 3,000 feet per minute and climbing. And let's contact Santo Domingo Center at this point.
Santo Domingo Center Citation Victor Tango 750, 3,300 climbing 9,000. Citation Victor Tango 750 Santo Domingo Center altimeter 30.3.
Okay, you probably saw the telltale illuminate. I hit the nav button because we were within 2 dots of the magenta track for the flight path. So heading mode extinguishes. GPS LNAV now takes over. And we'll just center up the heading bug. As a matter of course, we are in a climb. After takeoff checklist, flaps are up, gear is up. Let's extinguish landing lights. We are climbing to the first step clearance. Flight level change. Auto throttle is on.
Climb and maintain 15,000 citation 750.
Just received our next step climb instruction to 15,000. And we're through the scattered cloud layer that was hanging over the airport. Typical hard blue Caribbean afternoon. 3,000 feet per minute at 250 knots. She's a very powerful jet. She likes to climb. So things move real fast once you are cleaned up out of takeoff configuration and you're on your en route leg. Since we're now above 10,000 and outside of terminal airspace, flight speeds, the flight management system speed schedule is going to send us to 300 knots per the performance indicators earlier, or Mach 0.80, whichever is applicable. So the jet has pitched down once again to increase speed another 50 knots. Once we're at 300, we will resume climb. So here we go, we're just about at 300, and there we go. And we won't need
Citation 750 on 135.7. Good day. San Juan Center Citation Victor Tango 750 on 1700 climbing 15,000.
and we've reached the first waypoint on.
Climb and maintain flight level 250 citation 750.
And we've reached the first waypoint on the flight plan, which was Antex, and we're headed for BQN near San Sebastian. So we can dismiss the chart now for Punta Cana, and I'll actually take a moment to preset this for Princess Juliana. We'll probably call up at least the approach chart for that when the time comes. And we want the RNAV GNSS runway 10, so we'll preset it for that. Okay, we're in good shape, so let's dismiss the toggle. Let's dismiss the tablet for now. When the tablet's stowed, by the way, it's in this map pocket over here near pilot side left knee. And we'll center up the heading bug once again to current heading. And we're just about at transition altitude, so I'm going to give it a couple of 100 feet and then reset the barometer to standard 29.92. That way we have a reliable idea of our altitude above the transition. Just about passing 19,000 on our way to 25,000. So our flight plan, if you can envision it, and we'll call up the tablet for that purpose, just so we can use it as a general map reference, if you will, and we'll just use the OpenStreetMap with a zoomed out view. Our flight plan today is going to take us over the island of Puerto Rico, over the BVI, British Virgin Islands, and then we're going to connect upward. We're going to connect downwards, if you will, Zoomed out too far. Sorry. Okay, there we go. The BVI down to Antigua and Barbados way, but we won't get that far because TNCM, Princess Juliana, is right here. So it's a relatively short hop, especially for a jet of this performance envelope. But it is still a fun and demonstrative ride. And so we'll switch back to the Navigraph. That way we.
Climb and maintain flight level tree 10 citation 750.
Okay, there's our last step climb clearance to cruise. We should be there very shortly at current rate. So we'll dismiss this tablet once again. Really don't need it just yet. In a couple of minutes, we're going to have to start thinking about our descent planning. We currently are planning an approach into runway 10, which is the seaward side of Princess Juliana. It's got the famous beach where everyone hangs out at the airport perimeter, and for some reason finds it real fun to get blasted every time by incoming aircraft and departing aircraft and taking the jet blast straight in the face. Um, I'm an aviation fan. I don't get it, but that's okay. Whatever entertains people, I guess, and it doesn't harm anyone else. So, our descent will be at 300 knots, Mach 0.80, descent angle of 3 degrees. That's standard. Um, we are going to land at runway 10, and we are taking the um, RNAV runway approach, and we're going via the juice transition, which is actually coincides with one of the last waypoints on our en route legs, so that's perfect. We'll just transition straight into the initial approach fix at juice and take runway 10 via RNAV. And we won't activate that just yet. Actually, I think I can probably do it now, and we'll just activate it. There we go. And so let's just check the active flight plan. There's a discontinuity after juice, which we want to get rid of because VNAV will not calculate a full path down and manage us accordingly from a step down perspective. So we want to get rid of that as soon as possible. So we'll hit delete the discontinuity. Perfect. Now that the FMS draws a straight line between JUICE as the IAF and AVACI, which is the IACF, or the intermediate approach fix. And Lessor is the final approach fix at 1,700 feet. And map on, of course, is the minimum approach point. So let's do this. We're going to go to the configuration here, and as soon as we can top 310, I'm going to immediately dial in the minimum clearance of 1,700 at the final approach fix. That is the lowest level altitude that we are cleared for in the entirety of our flight plan. And that will trigger, all things considered, it will trigger a top of descent calculation, and the jet will calculate a VNAV path from the top of descent all the way down to the FAF so that we can catch the calculated glide path from the RNAV approach. So here comes the altitude selector warning because we're just a little under 500 feet to go. And we're going to let it stabilize. There we go. And that warning, of course, is because we at flight level 310, we should not have the APU running. So we will shut off the APU now. That extinguishes that caution. All right, let's dial down. There's 1,000. There's 1,700 on altitude selector. We're going to press VNAV. FMS is thinking about it. Okay, it says, yep, I recognize you've dialed in a lower descent, a lower altitude for the V.
118.75 citation 750. Good day.
Okay, center can wait a minute. Um, it's also calculated a path, a VNAV path, and as far as we can tell, if we go through the flight plan, there are no descent legs that are not achievable or crossed out, indicating that in between those waypoints, we can certainly achieve the necessary descent rate to reach the target altitude as required, given our current performance values. To help with some of the envisionment of your VNAV profile, dev team created our or recreated the ability of the Citation 10 to provide you with a vertical situation display or a vertical profile. What it is a side view of the required descent or ascent as part of your flight plan. So among other things, this will show you in a side view how far away your top of descent is, and then going downwards, it will show you all of your waypoints down to the approach, as well as the altitude fixes necessary. And you can monitor the jet's performance and see whether you're trending upwards, which means that you're going too fast, and you may not be able to hit the next waypoint at the desired altitude fix in order to safely make the FAF catch the glide path and land safely. You may not have seen it here clearly enough, so let me do it again on the MFD over here on the co-pilot side, which I keep at a longer range for easy scale. So I keep this one around 5, and then I boost the zoom out on this one to see what's really ahead of me. Press the MFD setup, and then the vertical profile soft key, and there it is. And the reason why it's blank is there's no waypoints currently ahead of you based on that scale. So we'll just move the scale out. There it is. You can see the top of descent marker right there, just after this waypoint, which should be Malie, M-A-L-I-E. And so we should be top of descent at Malie, and the EFB setting that says pause at top of descent should kick in about 30 seconds before flying over top of descent point and pause the sim entirely. So we'll show you how that works. And as you can see here, you've got all the waypoints all the way down to juice at the IAF, and it's giving you all the altitude fixes necessary so that you can maintain or follow that VNAV path accurately to make the final approach fix and capture the glide path and get put down safely by the autopilot. Okay, so that is our descent. What we need to do is just plug in some of the landing data so that we can generate some v-speeds for the approach and the reference. So performance init, next, next. We did that. We did takeoff, next. Confirm, takeoff, next. Climb, cruise, descent. There we go. Landing. All right. We have a runway. It's 7,546 feet. So we just need to generate some of these values right here. Given the sims, oh, what the, okay. Don't know why, but landing gear just got triggered, probably because I clicked on it by accident using the mouse key. That wasn't a good thing. And we're coming up pretty quick on Mali. So I don't think we're going to be we're in range quite yet for the ATIS at Princess Juliana. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull some of the weather information since we are operating off of real weather. We can pull it from the Navigraph, and wind is 6060 at 11, and we'll just move that chart back. Temperature is 28, and we'll translate the HPA in a second. So just read that back, 060 at 11. And that's a notation that you use for wind. Outside air temperature at ground is a balmy 82. That's 28 degrees centigrade. And that translates to 29.97 if I'm not mistaken. Nope, not 29.97. Sorry. We'll fix that in a sec. That translates to 30.03. That looks about right. Runway conditions should be dry. Let's just read the weather briefing. 061, overcast, scattered, remarks. Okay. Should still be dry, and we will not be operating anti-ice systems, and flaps will be full 35, and we'll still be within landing weight limits. We have 7,500 feet of runway. We'll use 3,100, 3,200 roughly of it, and we'll generate a VAP of 127 and a VREF of 122. Okay. And we're good to go. So we're just about at TOD, so this is good. I'll just keep us here, and I'll zoom out a little bit because it should, yep, there it is. We paused at top of descent, so and if you read the instructions to continue flying, you can use the set pause off key binding. Not everyone has that. press escape to open the pause menu and choose resume. That's what most folks do. Or for your convenience, we enabled this acknowledge button, and there you go. And we really didn't need to pause at top of descent. We had just finished all our descent planning and generated our approach and ref speeds. So we should be good to go in a second. What's going to happen now is as we fly over top of descent, autothrottle is going to bring us back down to speed for descent, which is 0.80 Mach or 300 knots. And then we're going to continue down using the VNAV profile. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit over there, or I can zoom out a little bit over here. There you go. Autothrottle just slowed us down. Speed is slowing down. Altimeter is unwinding, and we are at just a little over 25, just a little under 2,500 feet per minute. So it's a pretty robust descent at this point. And finally, let's update San Juan Center. And unfortunately, ATC is out of sync with our flight plan. So they might try and nag us to return to cruise altitude, even though we've reached top of descent at this point. Sometimes the tops of descents in your flight plan and your EFB and the ATC in the sim do not coincide. So we might just get nagged for a little bit until they realize you should be, for all intents and purposes, descending at this point. Okay, so what we have here, and there you go. ATC is beginning to nag us for being below cruise altitude. At some point, it's going to sync up again with the plan and realize that based on our proximity and where we are in current condition, it's going to say, yep, now you can descend. Until then, we can either just play this game of acknowledging the ATC and saying, yep, I'm going to go back right up to altitude, or we can switch out the active frequency and cut them off like I did earlier and switch to guard. So I think what we'll do is we'll just switch to guard at this point for a little bit and come back later and see whether they're more amenable towards syncing up with our flight plan. So we're still in a descent, passing flight level 230, and we're just over Coral Harbor. And I think we're just a little above where we need to be from a VNAV perspective, but let's continue to monitor the situation using the vertical situation display, which still shows us on track to meet the FAF at 1,700 feet. Okay, so we're in a descent right now, about 300 knots, 397 knots true, um, passing 19,000. So we will have to revert back to local altimeter once we pass flight level 180, of course. Um, the way that we do this is certainly for me, I take advantage of what I call a sim-ism. Um, Everyone who's spent a lot of time in Flight Simulator 2020 knows that the B key is a standard keybind to synchronize you with local barometer in the sector that you're in, even if you are not in touch with ATIS or ATC, to give you that prompt. So that's exactly what we're going to do once we pass under 18,000, which is any moment now. There it is. So I'm going to wait till about 17,800 and then I'm going to press the B key and we're back to 30.03. And that should be giving us with very accurate local altimeter readings. It is a cloudy day, a little bit unusual, but for the Caribbean, but at least it's not active precipitation, it's just cloud cover. So we're not necessarily trying to punch our way through some convective clouds or other rough air penetration. So this should be a relatively smooth flight and descent into Juliana. We're now at LARP, and after that it's another 26 nautical miles to Juice, where we should be, which is again the initial approach fix to RNAV 10 into Princess Juliana. And I think we are now, yes, we should now be more or less in sync with the VNAV profile across the board, and we should be able to make the final approach fix with some high confidence at this point. So we'll keep it here for a little while longer and start to configure the aircraft for the final approach to runway 10. All right, let's recontact with San Juan Center and see if they're going to pass us off to approach control at this point. Oh, and they canceled our flight following. They canceled our IFR, so we're stuck now with flight following. So, well, let's go through the motions and re-request the IFR.
Citation Victor Tango 750 citation C752 1 miles southeast of Tango Uniform Papa Whiskey 11800. Request flight following.
Citation Victor Tango 750 San Juan Center, clock 3433. Citation 750 radar contact 23 miles southeast of Tango Uniform Papa Whiskey at 11200. Altimeter tree 0.03.
And finally, ATC syncs up with the plan. That took a little bit. All right, so we're almost at juice. Altitude constraint at juice is remain above 2,600, which we will be. We're still passing through 7,500 at this point. I'm just going to keep hitting the B key a little bit and update the barometer. So it's now actually jumped down to 3001.
Citation 750, please expedite your climb flight level 230.
Okay, I spoke too soon. ATC is definitely out of sync with the plan at this point. One can only hope that we get handed over correctly to approach control and then to the tower, but I wouldn't hold my breath at this point. This is one of those moments in the sim where you just go, well, there's another point of improvement that we could really use in terms of full integration, or as some of you have already probably discovered, you prefer to use a third-party ATC solution to resolve this particular sim limitation. In either case, we're now,
Citation 750, please expedite your climb flight level 230.
yep, we are not going to get handed off to control. So I think what's going to happen is we'll probably just process this approach independently, meaning that we'll have to disregard any and all ATC instructions unless they happen to coincide with our approach and provide us with the necessary clearance to land, and we'll just land independently. In any case, that's fine because I want to show this part of the descent and landing, which should round out this tutorial flight. So right now we're bouncing around a little bit because we're popping in and out of the clouds. We are still at 250 knots.
Please expedite your climb flight level 230.
Nope. It's just going to keep nagging us at this point. Well, that's fine. Let's switch the display down to 12.5 and this one down to 5 again. So we're just about at juice, and we're gonna still be above 2,600 feet, which is the altitude restriction, and will remain there until the final approach fix, where we should be at 1,700. So,
Citation 750, descend and maintain 2,600.
wow, finally, there we go.
Descend and maintain 2,600 citation 750.
Okay, ATC is finally with us, so I'm going to start to configure for the landing at this point. So first things first, we're going to put on the landing lights. Passenger safety is still on. We never took it off because it was such a short ride. We're right now going to remain at 2,600. There is another top of descent at Avaki, which will bring us down to 1,700. So you can see VALT path is still recognizing that we want to be at 1,700, and VPAF says, okay, for this leg between juice and Avaki, we will remain at 2600 because that is the altitude restrictions between those two points in the approach. So again, Avaki is the intermediate approach fix. It's in between the IAF and the FAF, and that'll set us up for a 5 nautical mile run to Lessor, which is the final approach fix right there. There we go.
Citation 750 on 128.905. Good day. Juliana approach citation Victor Tango 750, 2600.
Citation Victor Tango 750, Juliana approach radar contact. Altimeter 30.00.
So at this point, with Avaki coming into play in a 5 nautical mile final, I'm going to switch to AT-Man, and we're going to start to slow down the aircraft. So I'm going to take it down to about 210 knots. And you can see out there in the distance past the portside A-pillar, Princess Juliana is right there. Vaki's coming up, top of descent, so I'm going to take it down a little bit more. I'm going to bring it down to about 180. That way that'll give us plenty of time to configure for final landing. Again, our approach numbers are right there in the PFD for reference. 127 on the approach and 122 for the VREF as we cross the threshold. So let's take it down a little bit more. $160. We'll bring flaps out around 140.
Tower on 118.7, citation 750. Good day. Juliana Tower citation Victor Tango 750 are at runway 10.
Okay, we're at about 140, and we just passed top of descent. We are in VNAV. I'm going to bring out the flaps. Take us down to around 130. That'll put us a couple of knots above calculated V approach. I have also already armed approach mode. That's the ALGP illumination right there. There's our vertical deviation scale. Once we pass lessor, we should pick up the GP, all things considered. If not, we'll have to hand fly it down. And I'm going to increase gonna zoom in a little bit more on the MFD and see how we're doing. Still on track. You can see the runway coming into sight. You can see the famous beach right there at the end of runway 10. That section over there is all the hotels. This open area over here is part of the leeward side of a lagoon, and this is the sheltered harbor component over here on the far side. And we just picked up the glide path, so we are descending correctly. So I am going to
Citation 750, wind 085 at 11 runway 10, clear to land.
Cleared to land runway 10, citation 750.
okay. Gear coming down. Flaps configured. What we're going to do is we're going to slow it down a little bit. About 124. Keeping an eye on the altimeter. Center up the heading bug. We won't need the tablet. I'll just get that out of the way. That way it's less of a distraction. And things are coming into view and becoming clearer. So I'm seeing all sorts of little boat traffic. That looks like a sailboat right there, dead ahead of us, about halfway to the runway. Yep, there's another one. It's a great view. Enjoy it. And there's a big honking cruise ship right over there. As you can see, the entire line of all the luxury hotels over there at the 11 o'clock position. Runways in sight. Disconnecting autopilot. Pulling back a little bit. Let's clear beach perimeter. And there we go. We got thrust reversers on.
Citation 750, exit runway.
Okay. Landing lights are coming off. Flaps are going up. Taxi lights are coming on. Let's not stop here.
Citation 750, contact ground on 118.7, good day.
118.7 citation 750. Good day. Juliana ground citation Victor Tango 750. Request taxi to the gate.
Citation Victor Tango 750, Juliana ground. Taxi via taxiway Delta to the ramp.
Taxi via taxiway Delta to the ramp citation Victor Tango 750.
Now for the fun part. Actually, we're just going to find a parking spot and we'll shut down at that point. So we'll just turn around over here. Even though we are taking up technically a legitimate spot for a commercial jetliner, we'll just pull up right up to the terminal and stop right here. Okay. And that, folks, was the end-to-end tutorial flight for the Cessna Citation X from FlightFX. We hope you found this information useful, maybe a little bit entertaining, especially all of our clear violations of federal aviation regulation rules and generally inconsistent performance of airmanship displayed during various portions of a flight. But hopefully you found all of that information useful to you, and you'll apply it when you fly the jet on your own. We look forward to creating more content for you and showcasing some of the great products that the studio has. And we'll see you in the simulator skies. Take care.